So recently, one of the videos I did is where I talked about where the whole concept of me talking about, and suggesting, and almost once, twice, maybe three times a year, coming out and saying that the time is now for a female artist, up and coming, or or established, to try to do a music video very identical in visual tone to Peter Gabriel's 1986 Sledgehammer. And I stick by what I said in that video because it's true. But one thing I'm sure anybody would probably be wondering as to why I constantly talk about it is, when did I become a fan of it, at all? And like anybody that grew up in the 80s, I grew up as a kid, being a fan of it. If there was one thing that was on in my house, at times, it was MTV, because my sisters, of course, were my oldest sister was 4 years older than me. My second oldest sister was 2 years older than me. And, they would watch MTV just for the music videos that were on there, from, the likes of the Jets to Whitney Houston to Lisa, Prince, you name it. Anybody that was, Debbie Gibson, Paula Abdul, anybody that was a big, hit to them, New Kids on the Block, you name it. Anybody that was looked at as a big star, especially for the young audience, they, around their age, that is, they would tune in and watch. My older sister, like I said, she's 4 years older than me, so she would have been like 10, 11 years old when Sledgehammer came out. My second oldest sister, she's 2 years older than me. She would have been like 8 or 9 years old when it came out. But again, they were at that age where, where me as a kid, being the youngest, I was more into cartoons and, pretends and all that still. Because, of course, I was homeschooled. I didn't really start official public school until about 6, 7 years old. Mostly 6, I believe. But I was, I was basically still enjoying life as a kid, and so were they. But, being a kid, being the only son, I really wasn't in that much into. I really wasn't much into, MTV as, much as they were, or anybody else at their age was, because I was more of, a Transformers guy, G.I. Joe guy, He-Man guy, Silverhawks, Thundercats, to an extent, Gem, MLPG1, you name it. I was basically a fan of, cartoons and, like I said, make-believe, stuff like that. But what happened in 1986 was, there were two music videos that came out that got my attention and got me to watch. They got me to watch MTV. And that was The Touch by Stan Bush from Transformers the movie. And then and then around the same time, Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel. Now you might say, well, you might ask basically, well, why was Peter Gabriel the second one that got you to watch MTV? Well, if you watch the Sledgehammer music video today, and whether you grew up after the 80s or during the late duration of the 80s or throughout the 90s, maybe the 2000s, basically when Sledgehammer debuted in 1986, it was basically like what everybody has said it was. It was unlike any music video we had seen. We had seen music videos be showcased to us visually and creatively by the likes of, the King of Pop, Michael Jackson, Prince himself, Whitney to an extent. We've seen creativity in videos before and afterwards. But what was interesting was when this video came out, not only was it unique in its stature, but it basically followed through with what one of the lyrics of the song basically described. Because one of those lyrics in the Sledgehammer song was, "I'll be anything you need." And throughout the music video, you saw Peter, his face and head, becoming anything on the screen. Becoming like an ice sculpture on the screen, having a house built around him, you know, what you see his mouth and an opening, but it's like a big old wall or a house. You know, anything you could think of, it was shown. It was shown, and you know, it really just I don't know what it was, but it really just caught a lot of people by surprise, because like I said, you have Michael Jackson, that was known for basically, you know, being creative in his music videos, like with, you know, before Sledgehammer, you had things like Thriller and even Billie Jean and Beat It to an extent, and then afterwards you had things like Smooth Criminal and Bad and, you know, Leave Me Alone, and, you know, all those creative ideas that he did for music videos that were also in terms of short films. And when you got to Sledgehammer and you compared it to what he had done prior, that being MJ, it was like nothing could compare to what Peter was doing here, because basically the catalyst for all this happening was Peter saw the creativity in Talking Heads' Road to Nowhere, which I'm assuming came out a year or two before, and he went and talked to one of the directors or one of the people behind it, and he said, you know, I want you to help me out with my music video. And according to what the guy said, Peter took him to dinner, got him drunk on wine, and they made the agreement. And I guess Peter said, whatever you have to do, do it. Go nuts if you want to. Well, that's basically what they described, that he was allowed to go nuts with the video. And he did just that. He did just that. He went completely nuts. To the point that, like I said, the end result was unlike anything people had seen before. Because, like I mentioned, you would see some kind of CGI, you know, some kind of early version of CGI in a video, like with Talking Heads and all that, and or stop motion and everything. But when it came to Sledgehammer, basically, I guess what Peter wanted to do, and Johnson being allowed to go nuts, if you will, along with the people that created Wallace and Gromit, you know, basically, I guess, you know, Peter wanted to take it to another level. It's like he saw what they did with, you know, Road to Nowhere, the Talking Heads that is, and said, hey, I want to take that to another level. And by, like I say, allowing Johnson to go completely nuts, you know, or get as creative as he wants to, that's exactly what you know, what happens. And the end result ended up being basically the most watched music video in MTV history, period, or at least one of them. In a music video that at the 1987 MTV Music Video Awards set the record that stands today, as far as I know, stands still today, as far as I know, for most awards won at the MTV Video Music Awards. The most, basically a whopping 9, at a whopping 9. And it's because of that impact that it's had that its influence is still felt today. You know, its influence, you know, its curiosity is still felt today, you know, by not just, you know, fellow musicians, you know, artists, but by fans. I mean, you go here on YouTube and there's a lot of fans that are doing reaction videos to it, you know, and they're enjoying the song, but when they see the creativity of what, you know, went into this video, they're surprised, because all of a sudden they're seeing this guy, they're seeing, you know, Peter's face on the screen, he's singing, they can tell it's stop motion and all that, you know, a mixture of stop motion and, you know, whatever. But then all of a sudden, here's Peter's face, you see all this fruit come out, circle around him, and the next thing you know, he turns into a fruit face that splits apart, you don't see nothing behind it, comes back together, and then it swirls back into his mouth, you know, bringing back, you know, his face into view. And then you see, like I said, the wood come down and he becomes a house, or at least indicates he's a house. And then his head pops out of the house, and all of a sudden it's claymation. And, you know, a lot of people's reaction, again, like I said, when you see those here on YouTube, you know, basically one of amazement and surprise, like, and also kind of WTF, like, you know, what the blank is going on here? Because they can't believe, you know, they can't believe what they're seeing. And then obviously to add to that, as I think I've mentioned before, you know, they find out when it was made and how long it took to be made, and that gives them a whole new respect of the fact that even back then, at a time where maybe they were not even a thought, you know, if you will, or they were like me, they were like 6, 7 years old, you know, and they're looking back at it now, you know, to them it gives them a much better respect for the video, you know, and how much creativity and process, you know, went into making this video reality. I mean, the fact that you had Peter himself have to lay down behind a glass, you know, lay behind a glass for 16 hours for a lot of the stuff to take, so that a lot of what the music video takes place, you know, takes place on camera, could happen at, or basically be visualized and be brought to life. So, yeah, a lot of people a lot of people reacting to it today are just like, you know, whoa. It's like, whoa, this, it amazes them. It amazes them, but also it amazes them, like I said, because of what they find out from a behind-the-scenes standpoint. Now, again, for me, as a kid, being six going on 7, like I said, the only things I saw on MTV besides Stan Bush's The Touch, and maybe throw in an occasional Michael Jackson video here and there, was Sledgehammer. And I remember all the time Sledgehammer would come on, you know, and it came on basically, like I said, it came on constantly. It's like every few hours, if not every day, doing a music video block or constant non-stop of music videos, it was on there. You know, you could not, you know, go a day without tuning in to MTV, without taking the remote in your hand, because yes, they did have remotes at that time too, aiming it at the cable box, tuning in to MTV, and all of a sudden the first video you see is Sledgehammer, and then a couple hours later you tune back to MTV, there's Sledgehammer again. You know, it was that widely played because of not just the song being good, but because of the creativity of the video itself, because at that time, like I said, we had seen creative videos, but not to that extent. You know, a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people say that the closest we had at that time was Road to Nowhere, but this blew Road to Nowhere out of the water, because they took that concept or that inspiration they got from it to the next upteenth level, and nobody can deny that. And as a kid, you're seeing this, not really knowing exactly what the lyrics of the song mean, although when you get older, you get pretty much a good idea of what they mean. But you're watching this as a kid, and all you're enamored by is the visuals. I mean, here's this person, all of a sudden he's got a train track going around with a train, you know, riding around his head, you know, on the track. You see a blue sky going across his face. You see his eye sculpture of his face. You see a fruit. You see his face turn into fruit, various fruits that split apart. And like I said, you don't see nothing in the background because it makes you believe, you know, as a kid that, oh my God, his face turned into fruit and now it's in pieces, you know. And then you see the claymation, which is another attraction, you know, that gets your attention because suddenly you're seeing a claymation version of the person and he's hitting his face with, you know, his hands that are turned into sledgehammers, and he's hitting his face, and then his face splits apart, and then you see his lips on the wall, and then all of a sudden you see this yin-yang sign become his new face temporarily, and then it splits into fish, and then you see this big old water, you see this big old water that just, you know, that comes as a result, I should say, comes out of his neck as a result afterwards. I was just trying to think about what I was going to say there. That's why I paused for a second. I do apologize. But you see this water coming out of his body or out of his neck area, and then all of a sudden it shoots up, and it's like it's a waterfall in reverse, and you see his face, and he's smiling, and then he turns back into a claymation version of his human face, and then that goes, you know, breaks apart, and all of a sudden you see this, as we find out later on, this collage wall, where it's like you could see his mouth, but it's kind of like this, it's like in a slight smile. And then you see this, you know, red paint splatter on him, where it's all you see is his eyeballs, you know, blinking at you. And then at the end, you see him become a starman, where he basically walks into the night sky, waves, and then it suddenly becomes one with it. You know, as a kid, that kind of stuff really sticks with you, because even though, like I said, you don't know what the song's really about until later on when you're older, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, the visual stuff is what really, you know, that kind of stuff is what really sticks with you in the long run. Excuse me there. It's what really sticks with you in the long run, because it's like, you know, you've never seen anything like that. you've never seen anything like that, because as a kid, it blows your mind that this is, here's a real person, but yet he's becoming all this stuff. And again, it goes back to that one line, that one lyric in the song where he says, "I'll be anything you need," and he visually backs that up on screen. And that basically is why I became, and basically when I first saw that, that's how I became, like any fan at that time, any kid at that time, became a fan of the song. Not just because the song is good in itself, but because the video is a great, representation of what the song, is. And basically the fact that when, like I said, one of the lyrics says, I'll be anything you need, and it's backed up, what more can you say? Now, as I got older, of course, I still remained a fan, and anytime it came on, or at least I thought it was going to come on, I would try to watch it. And over time, finding out more about the behind-the-scenes details as I got older, again, like a lot of the people that do the reaction videos, it gave me an appreciation of the fact that, here's an artist that went through all this, trouble, if you will, didn't have to, but all this trouble, just to, well, I would not just say trouble, but trouble and dedication, just to, give us something that would be remembered to the end of time, or remembered even to this day, and it is. And it is. And this is why that out of all the videos that he could remaster in 4K or potentially 8K, he decides to always go with Sledgehammer. This is why almost a decade ago, and I don't know what happened to it, he decided to come out and say, hey, I want to crowdsource, basically, for the 25th anniversary, I want to crowdsource, the Sledgehammer music video. And by doing so, he wants to give the ball to creative people out there that are fans of it to recreate their favorite iconic scenes. So it shows you the impact that it has. And when you look at someone like Kira Greens, I think, with a In Your Arms deal, you can't tell me she didn't take inspiration from Sledgehammer. You can't tell me that, like, the La D6 or FK Twigs or some others didn't take inspiration from Sledgehammer, because they did. The song, the song Eyes on the Road by, what was it, the Lonely Foxes or something? I can't think of the name. The video was inspired and was paying a bit of homage to Sledgehammer. There's a cover song of Sledgehammer that pays tribute to the video as well. Not as good, but it does its best, does the best it can. You have a video where you have disabled artists trying to pay tribute to it. To me, it shows you the impact that this had, even years later, 35 years later, it shows you the impact that it has. And this is coming from basically what is known as a one-hit wonder of a song that basically afterwards he never was able to really replicate, not just in song, but in video style. I mean, he tried to replicate it with Steam, Big Time, Digging in the Dirt, you name it. He tried to replicate it, but he never could replicate it, because now everybody, apparently, every artist saw what he did and said, hey, we could do that, if not better. And they've been doing it ever since then. And again, this is why, ever since that moment in the early 2000s, and recently over the past, 7-6 years, I've been coming out once or twice or 3 times a year and saying a female artist needs to do something like this now. That now is the time for them to do this. Whether they're up and coming or established, now is the time for them to do this, independent or signed to a record label. Now is the time for them to do this, because again, if you're up and coming and maybe independent and you want to get noticed, something like this will do that. Something like this will do that. And that's why I always come out and say it. That's why I do that kind of video once or twice or 3 times a year. But in the end, though, when I look at Sledgehammer, I just look at a video that's, as a kid, just really, caught my attention and has never left since. It never really has left since. And, there are times that I remember with Tiny Toons, honestly, they would have the TTV, which I hope they bring back for the new one, which was their version of MTV. And there were times I was thinking, man, wouldn't it be something if Babs did she would, because basically some of the first TTV like videos were just the characters singing songs and all that were, they were basically pantomiming. it was the original artist, but it was being sung by the character. And there were times I've been thinking, man, wouldn't it have been something, well, not wouldn't have been something, but there were times I was watching and thinking, man, wouldn't it be cool if one of these videos that comes up, is a song, that Babs is singing from, let's say, an artist of the past or whatever, and it's in the vein of Sledgehammer, Peter Gabriel's music video. Because I think any character in Tiny Toons that could pull it off would be her. But we didn't get that. Maybe we'll get that in, if they bring it back in the new series. But overall, again, it just shows you the influence, the impact and the influences this video had. But everybody is still talking about it to this day. Everybody's reacting to it to this day. You got people like me trying to come out and encourage up-and-coming, established female singers, artists to do music videos identical to it, if not in every way, or pay homage to it in some kind of form or fashion. And you got, of course, people reacting to it. So, again, it shows you the legacy that this left behind and continues to leave behind as we go further into the future. But what do you guys think? What were your thoughts on Sledgehammer when you first saw it? How did you feel about it? Do you think any female artist can replicate it today? Let me know in the comment section below. Hopefully you'll be live chatting or have live chatted during the premiere here. Check me out at BW Roses on VENMO, BW Roses discussions on all your favorite podcast locations. As also check me out on Patreon at BW Roses. Also check me out at Venmo, to donate if you want to there as well. And as well as check out my Teespring store. I really appreciate it. But until next time, guys, take care. God bless. Thank you all for watching. But what are your thoughts? And I'm out.